Hello, friends, and welcome to another conversation here on Western Ag Network's Fence Lines and Headlines. Thank you so much for joining us here on Facebook, YouTube, or the audio portion on the Lanecast Ag Podcast. We're going to share a few of our top stories from this past week. We've had a busy week out across the nation. We even got outside of Western Ag Network country, making our way down to Florida this past weekend for the Angus Convention 2023. Some great conversations that we have been sharing on our multimedia platforms and our TV and radio programs, but we're going to share a few more of those here today. Now, a few of those top stories that we are going to share, we're going to remember an Air Force veteran, NASA astronaut, and Montana rancher Frank Borman, who passed away this week, a day before Veterans Day. We're also going to catch up with Mr. Joe Goggins. He's going to share a state of the cattle industry, if you want to call it that. He gave some very good insight to the cattle business and some things that should be done to help improve and make profitability a top priority for producers out in the countryside. And we also caught up with some other folks in Orlando focused on the future of cattle genetics and how that can improve our herds and also come into that profitability and innovation conversation. So thanks for joining us here on Fence Lines and Headlines. Those are going to be three of our topics here today. But this past Friday, we did celebrate Veterans Day, and I truly believe we should celebrate our veterans and those who have served and also gave the ultimate sacrifice every single day, not only on Veterans Day or Memorial Day, but every single day. Because of them, we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we should always take time to honor those who have served. And on Thursday, November 9th, the world lost one of those individuals who fought and explored for the future of mankind. And of course, here in the United States, the opportunity to live free, that being Mr. Frank Borman. Now, he was a retired Air Force colonel, a NASA astronaut, and later in life, he became a Montana rancher. And back in 2017, our Russell Nimitz caught up with Frank Borman at his ranch there outside of Billings, Montana. And here's just a quick glimpse at the life that Borman led.
There was a battle with the Soviet Union to see who would get to the moon first, and that was my mission at that time.
On loan to NASA from the Air Force, Frank was the command pilot for Gemini 7.
We were warriors in the Cold War.
He was also the commander of Apollo 8, the first mission to fly around the moon.
I was not struck with the space cadet deal. I want to pick up a rock on the moon. I just wanted to beat the Russians. There are 400,000 Americans involved in that program, and they all did their job well, or I wouldn't be here talking to you.
As for ranching, Frank's still trying to prove he has the right stuff.
Those are bulls, aren't they?
Again, that was just a tiny glimpse into the fascinating life of Frank Borman, an Air Force colonel, NASA astronaut, and in later life, as we mentioned, a Montana rancher. Our hats are off to you, Mr. Borman, and all those who have served in our military. We appreciate you and thank you for your service each and every day. We're going to be back with Mr. Joe Goggins here on Fence Lines and Headlines right after this.
We've been told not to judge a book by its cover. The same could be said for your cattle. With more black cattle on the market today, wouldn't it be great to capture the extra value you've added to your herd? Angus Link makes cattle stand out. Enrolling in Angus Verified is an objective, reliable way to describe the genetic potential for your cattle, and it signals to buyers yours are different than the rest. The Genetic Merit Scorecard draws on the industry's largest database to evaluate calf genetics and predict performance potential from weaning to the packing plan with real-world data. Claim your competitive edge with Angus Verified and the Genetic Merit Scorecard. 2 programs under one Angus Link.
As we come back to our Fence Lines and Headlines program here today, as I mentioned at the top of our conversation, we were in Orlando this past week at Angus Convention 2023. And gosh, we got to talk to so many cattlemen and women and industry leaders while there. If you weren't able to catch some of that content, check it out on our YouTube, Facebook, and of course, westernagnetwork.com. And we have so many more interviews that we're going to be sharing throughout the days and weeks. But when you have a chance to sit down with an individual like Mr. Joe Goggins, you listen. You listen to his advice, his views on the industry, and just tips that can really help us out in the countryside. And I just wanted to share a few more of the statements that Joe shared with the Western Ag Network crew while we were in Orlando. Just some thoughts that he has on how we can become better cattlemen, how profitability should be a top priority for producers, and of course, how we need to come together to advocate for the livestock industry and U.S. agriculture as a whole. So, here's a few of the conversations and talking points that Mr. Joe Goggins shared with us while we were in Orlando this past weekend. A little nicer than it was back home a week ago, but we're at the height of the fall run back in Montana and across the West. How are things shaping up there for your family's livestock markets and just on the livestock end of things?
You know, it's good. It's been remarkable to me how resilient this feeder calf market has been. I mean, we've had some ups and downs. I mean, when you look at what's happening in the world and the uncertainty there is in the world, and the feeder calf market especially, just it stays resilient. You can tell. You look at these auction receipts to these auction markets all across America, they're down, and we got less cows. We still don't see a herd rebuild going on, and I think it's a. I think in my career, I never remember a time in my time that it's been more. There's more opportunity. There's more promise to tomorrow to this. Owning the factory, owning the cow than right now. I think there's never been a better time in my mind to keep some of these females around you.
Now, obviously, you've probably got to talk with a lot of producers that are marketing their calves or maybe even thinking of liquidating that herd and putting their hat up on the rung and maybe calling it a day and retiring from the business. What has that conversation been like? And are we seeing as many producers thinking about that, or is that just more that local coffee shop talk, guys just saying, maybe I'll get out of the business to sell these cows, but it's hard to get out of the cow business. I know that.
Yeah, it's as far as an auction market owner, as you well know, I sit on the LMA board as well, and from a standpoint of auction market owners across America, it's a real concern, the amount of producers that we are losing. And I just look at our own case. I know last year, in the month of December, we have in that 1 week, we'll sell 10 to 15,000 bred females each year. And last year we had 15 total and complete dispersals. And in all of my time, and from being a young kid till now, I never remember a time where we had more than 3 or 4. And we've got more complete and total dispersals on the books for this year than we had last year. And it's just you can see we're aging out. There's a lot of these producers that are getting to the age where they see a pretty good exit, and a lot of them have it in mind that they're going to run yearlings and this and that, and probably be okay. But all I know is at the end of this thing, somebody's got to make them. And I think for those of us that stay the course, that keep some females, that keep the factory around us, I think there'll be some real opportunity in the days ahead. I really do.
How do we keep people in business though, in your eyes? How do we keep young people maybe expanding with the family, going out on their own? What are, obviously it's tough if you're coming in to buy. Obviously, it's always great to get a loan, but we know interest rates are high and these cows are priced pretty high. But in your mind, how do we keep the family ranches going?
I think number one, we're kind of leaving the scenario of these ranches staying generational, and that's really how America was built, not just in agriculture, but as a lot of small businesses throughout America have been a very generational type scenario, and we're losing that. And I think the only way we're going to combat that is we as an industry have got to unify. We have got to come together. We got to quit throwing rocks at each other. We got to quit suing everybody. We have got to come together on some ideas that will increase margin, that will increase and incentivize young people to not only want to be able to do this, but be able to do this. And on top of that, I think we've got to come up with some incentives for people to leave their land in livestock production. And I think there's ways of doing that, but we have got to have a real serious conversation. All of us groups, I don't care what industry group you're involved in. I don't care if you're a stock grower, NCBA, or a U.S. Cattleman, or RCAF, Farm Bureau, Farmers Union. we have got to come together on a few of these ideas and unify and go with a unified message to these people in DC and come together. And I think if we do that, we'll see young people come in this thing, but they're not going to do this. It's too much work to break even.
Yes, it is. And I appreciate you sharing that insight and some of your thoughts there. And also we got on a more positive note there. You got to sit behind the microphone there and sell some pretty high calves this year. And what was that like, seeing $3-4 calves, or even a little bit higher on some of those lighter weight ones this year?
Yeah, it's that's why I say it's been such a resilient market, and you can tell we're short. And I remember a year or two ago, people bringing their cows in and selling them and leaving balling because they didn't want to sell them, or they'd sell the calves and you knew it wasn't going to meet their note at the bank, and everybody left the sale this year smiling, and it's way more gratifying. I think the worst thing we can do as an industry, however, though, is apologize for what we're getting for these cattle. This is what they're supposed to bring, and it's a good thing they are bringing it. For when you look at what these input costs are, when you look at interest, when you look at what a cost of a baler, cost of a swather, cost of fertilizer, just these inputs, cost of a pickup, these cattle got to bring this. And we as an industry, the worst thing we can do right now would be apologize for what these things can bring.
Again, a big thank you to Mr. Joe Goggins for sharing his insight and thoughts on the state of the cattle business. We'll be back with more, looking at innovations in genetics in the cattle breed right after this.
There's no question in my mind that third-party verification is important.
It's being verified by someone other than me, and it just gives some confidence to the consumers that we are indeed doing what we say we do.
People want the documentation. They want to know what you're doing. They want to know where the food they're eating, where it came from.
By verifying and documenting and having transparency, that they can move forward, and it's a third party that's telling that story, it's to everybody's benefit.
Well, as we look to the future of the cattle business this week in Orlando at the American Angus Association annual convention, looking at the different genetic aspects of the breed is a top priority for producers and the association alike. Joining us here today is Kelli Retallick-Riley with Angus Genetics, Inc. And, as we come down here to convention, you're interacting with so many producers. I guess, what is it like explaining your aspect of the industry and the importance of the science behind the breed? I guess, how important is that in your eyes?
Yeah, so one of the things that, you get that $1 million question growing up, what do you want to do with your life? And I always said I wanted to be a bridger, right? Bridge the science to the breeder. So I think it's ultimately really important that they understand the science in order to make sure they can apply it correctly to their own individual herds. And so all the conversations we get in around here, we got a wide variety of members. We serve in a lot of different capacity from the American Angus Association perspective. We have a lot of astute breeders that are technology driven, and they're always asking us, what's next, Lane?
Well, so many producers out there, we talk about, oh, this cow's 12 years old, and she's 13 years old, she's 14, and there's always that debate. Yep. Do you keep a cow that long? Do you want to keep, how do you keep her females in the line too? And so that longevity is always an important conversation. What is some of the work on that longevity front that you are all up to?
Yeah. So October's been a really exciting month for AGI. We released the research version of our functional longevity EPD, and that's getting at exactly what you're talking about. Can we identify the sire lines in the females, right, that can stay in the herd and calve every year? And so this functional longevity EPD has been a welcome sight and to a lot of different breeders. In Montana, actually, I know that's in your constituency, they lead the country as far as inventory reporting enrollments, right? And so they've been, and those producers in your area have really been pivotal to basically bring this solution and this tool to reality.
Now, when we look at implementing that, what are some of the steps that as we further that research and look at that, how is that maybe going to change how we market some of those cattle in our catalogs and promote it that way too?
Yeah. So obviously we're in a research phase right now, but I really think this is one of those tools that's going to allow, our maternal breeders, right? Our maternal breeders have had tools like weaning weight or maternal milk, calving ease to really promote those cattle. This is one more tool in their toolkit to continue to promote those cattle. it's also one of those things that's going to continue to allow us to make sure that the Angus cow is the maternal solution for the beef industry, which I think is of the utmost importance when we talk about our commercial cow-calf herd.
Well, as a broke wannabe rancher and an individual who talks for a living, genomics are so interesting. And that's one of the big topics, not only here at convention, but day in and day out for the Angus Association and all of its different entities. What are some of these genomic conversations happening at convention this week in terms of not just the livestock end, but also the human end of that?
Yeah, so we have a really interesting session, Innovation in Genomics, and we're going to kind of overview how Angus got to where we are today. And honestly, it's really started back in 1958 when our producers started in AHIR, right? Angus Herd Improvement Records, collecting this huge, massive phenotypic data. And honestly, that was the first stepping stone. They didn't even know they were doing it back then. But that's what's really made genomics so successful here in the Angus industry. And then we're going to learn from aquaculture and human genomics about how are they applying very similar solutions to those very different industries. And I think those are sorts of things where aquaculture is obviously a growing protein source, right, around the globe. And so how do you make that more efficient and sustainable and adaptable to their different climates? And then from a human genomics perspective, you know, we have Kristen Morgard from Inherit Biosciences that's going to be talking about, you know, how she's making people's dreams come true by understanding male fertility, right, and applying that and making sure that she can provide solutions to people who are struggling, right, to create their next generation.
Yep. Well, again, a lot of important information. Just any last items that maybe our listeners and viewers should know what your team is up to?
Yeah, so like I said, we had a big October. Research Functional Longevity is out. We'd love to get feedback from our Angus breeders as we continue to refine that tool. And probably another big item that we had out in October is this World Angus Evaluation, where we brought in lots of phenotypes from our friends across the pond in Angus, Australia, to promote basically the international trade and commerce of U.S. genetics. And so just a really unique opportunity and quite honestly, Lane, a fun October that we had at AGI.
A lot of great information and a lot of great conversations happening here this week. So
Absolutely.
Kelli, thanks for joining us here today. Again, those were just a few of our conversations that we had this week on the road. And of course, here on our Fence Lines and Headlines program, we do want to thank IMI Global and Angus Link for sponsoring our coverage when we went. I don't even know which way. Yeah, I guess it'd be that way, Florida, from where I'm sitting here in my home studio. But thanking IMI and Angus Link for sponsoring our content from Angus Convention there in Orlando. And with that, friends, I want to thank you for joining us here on Facebook or YouTube or the podcast platform, the Lanecast Ag Podcast, and joining us here today as we share our conversations that we had here on the Western Ag Network. Do us a favor, share this conversation or make sure and subscribe to our platforms as well. We enjoy having you join us. Drop us a few comments or questions, anything that we can do to help you out in rural America, let us know. Again, for the Western Ag Network on this edition of Fence Lines and Headlines, I'm Lane Nordlund. We'll catch you next time.